everyone. Welcome to the last of the panels within the EU Pro Program final event. This is in a way a transition into the new program that we are starting soon. The EU Pro Plus program is the logical continuation of everything that we've done in the past. Our intention was to make this event as an introduction to what's expecting, what we can expect in line with the EU requirements, introducing new mechanisms of support to the local governments and new territories in terms of decentralization and new sources of funding, and redirecting certain funds in order to activate local potentials in the best possible way, enable local development. We decided to present some experiences from people regarding these territorial initiatives, and I would like to thank our participants and to introduce them. They're the pioneers of territorial development in Serbia. I would like to introduce Mr. Vladan Jeremic, head of RDA Radis from Zaječar, Slavko Lukic, head of RDA Zlatibor from Užice, Marica Mijajlović, of the city of Kraljevo urban land, and they will present what you can expect in the coming period and how we can improve the quality of work of the local governments in the future. Our moderator will be Radka Čolić. She will present the elements regarding territorial development, and throughout the implementation of the EU Pro Plus program, we will share information and develop capacities of our partners to be able to best implement certain policies in line with these territorial instruments. Radka, you have the floor. Thank you very much. I would like to thank you for inviting me for this panel today. This is a very good opportunity to talk about what can be done on territorial development in Serbia. This is the topic of the new project EU Pro Plus, but there are certain experiences of our colleagues from local governments and regional development agencies who have valuable input regarding access to EU funds. For my presentation on integrated sustainable territorial development. Thank you. It includes several main points, key points regarding territorial development. It relates to the definition of the term, what this approach entails, and what are the key aspects of integrated territorial development that are important to understand. We can move on. This is too far for me. The concept of integrated territorial development means to see the concept of territory in a different way, as a scenario, not only an administrative level. And it also means the harmonization of development potentials of the local concept, including different stakeholders, public participation, and not only problem solution, focus on problem solution, but a better knowledge of development potentials in the local concept. What is new today? And why are we looking at this integrated approach in this way? We are used to integrated approach to planning and development being integrating different aspects of development. And this is something that we traditionally have in all forms of planning we've had over the last few decades. What is new, actually, and what we mean when we say integrated territorial development, and what is the new step forward? It also includes involving different levels of the administration. It also means to integrate the different sources of funding, also links between sectors and among sectors using different policy strategies and instruments. And this is something new. This is also introduced by EU policies. What is also important for us when talking about integrated approach, and I believe this image will help you understand better what we're talking about. This is an example of Leipzig and the way how different funding sources are used for different areas to support urban development. Some of these things partially you will be able to see or hear from the colleagues today at this panel how our towns are trying to integrate different funding levels. We can see here national funds, German national funds, but also other funds, structural funds, and various projects that they use to fund specific projects. The topic of participation, it used to traditionally mean providing legitimacy to decisions and the planning process. The participation today through these concepts has a broader meaning. It's not just including citizen and public and getting legitimacy. This means to include various forms of knowledge to get better project results. This is an example from Kragujevac and from Užice. This is a process of developing the strategy of integrated urban development on central urban areas. This was implemented through the GTZ project in 2011 and 2012. When we're talking about governance, additionally, through the integrated territorial development, we have multi-level integrated governance. What does it mean? It means that in addition to the public sector, the public administration, and what we traditionally have as holders and organizers of public local development, other stakeholders are also identified, whether this is the commercial private sector or civil sector. Additionally, when we talk about the governance on higher levels, this also means to involve different levels above regional and national levels. When we're talking about territorial instruments, we have a spatial dimension, and there are different levels on which these strategies and projects can be developed. What you see is a graphic on the strategy of sustainable urban development of the Republic of Serbia, and the smaller images show the strategies of sustainable development of Niš developed 2007, 2009, then the strategy of integrated urban development of central urban area of Užice, Kraljevo, and Kragujevac. These were pioneering attempts. When we're talking about different territorial levels, they can go through, start from the range from the neighborhood level to the level of regions. This is the spatial dimension of development. These are some basic terms that are important to clarify this basic concept. And now we will move on to the presentations from our colleagues. First, we have Vladimir Jeremic from the RDA. I would like to ask you to say something about partnership, which is a pioneering attempt today in Serbia, but I know you've been doing this for quite a few years. Thank you. Hello from me too. I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me, and I would like to thank them a little less on the complexity of the topic that they gave me as an assignment to prepare. But when I started working on it, I changed into all you need to know about partnership in 10 minutes. And then when I developed the presentation, I saw that I couldn't do it in 10 minutes, and I went back to the traditional title. And so I'll talk something about intermunicipal partnerships and cross-border partnerships, which is a pretty complex topic. It is complex, but it is also very useful if it is used well. There are quite a few definitions of partnership. I like to use this one, which has several keywords, that this is some kind of relationship, but not any kind. It's formal, that we have common needs, that we have close cooperation, and particularly the last thing, that there are some rights, but also some duties. In Serbia, partnership means that we mainly have some rights, but when we're talking about duties, obligations, this is hard to accept. In Serbia, it is usual that we have some rights, but if we're partners, and that obligations belong to somebody else. So, in my practical work, I use this definition, and partnership usually brings some synergies, new ideas, improves the coordination of activities, provides opportunities to use additional resources, and everything that I put here in red is something that I've learned from my experience, that the most complex and most comprehensive partnerships are not the most efficient one. They're actually more often the most problematic ones. What are the advantages of a partnership? When we do working together with somebody, we avoid overlapping activities. Then we have some coordination of resources that are always available to use rationally. If there are different players from different sectors, each sector will be able to achieve their goals, because the interests within the sectors are not the same. So there will be increased scope of the objectives, and we will also achieve indirect results. It will enable us to understand one another better, and we will be able to connect different target groups through the partnership, not only the one that gathered us together initially. And theoretically speaking, intersectional partnership is another important notion. We have three sectors in the contemporary society: the public, private, and civil sector. They all have their own interests. Some are making money, some are spending money, some are a corrective factor, some are regulating. And it is important to understand each of these sectors and to know that they cannot individually represent citizens, and they all have their own roles, regardless of which sector individuals belong to, even though it might seem to them that they are the main actors. None of these are the main ones. The citizens should be represented by all three of these sectors equally. The law on local self-government provides the framework for intermunicipal cooperation, which is what we're talking about now, by saying, giving, I don't want to read this quote from the law, but the legal framework does exist and has existed for a while, and it enables us to establish intermunicipal cooperation, transferring tasks from within original competencies, utility tasks, and so on. The opportunities provided by the law are little used, partly because this is a relatively new thing, and also there are different problems. And I selected a few examples here. And now in intermunicipal partnerships, something that is already traditional is things related to municipal waste. We have a landfill in Duboko, which is an example of successful cooperation of several stakeholders. It is similar with the landfill in Pirot, in the Pirotsky district, 4 municipalities, and a number of projects in different stages of preparation. For example, around Niche, as the agency, we are technically in charge for the landfill that should be placed in Zaječar, and these are projects that encounter a lot of issues and have their own dynamics and will be finalized eventually. There is a new trend, zoo hygiene, and few are functional, like Vlasotince and Bojnik. They have joint asylum for animals and a shelter for animals. And we have Prijepolje, Priboj, Nova Varoš, Kučevo, Veliko Gradište, Malo Crniće, Petrovac na Mlavi have signed an agreement. Then Niš, Građan, Han and Svrdljig are about to sign an agreement to make the shelter in Gadžin Han that will be governed by the new company in Niš, which will take over, but it will be located in the territorial of Gadžin Han and so on. We have an example of an incomplete project of internal audit. Sokobanja and Boljevac, they initiated it and could not complete it because people need to be located in one municipality and then they had to work in another municipalities, and then the issues were around staffing, payment of salaries and so on. A number of activities were implemented, but it cannot be at this moment finalized. Then we have several, I like these examples that are not regulated by the law, but are neither prohibited and are functional, have been functional for years now. And these examples show that they should be looked at a little better and find some models. Maybe there we have the tourist organization of the West Serbia region. It's been around for 15 years. Užice, Bajna Bašta, Čajetina, Nova Varoš, Prijepolje, Sjenica, and so on and so forth. They've been working successfully, and it's the only, as far as I know, regional tourist organization, only regional tourist organization that's been around for 15 years. Then we have NALED. That's an example of an intersectoral partnership in action. There are three sectors there. The steering committee of NALED has representatives from the civil society, from the government, from the business sector. They have quotas there, and NALED is also functioning, has been operational for 15 years. Then we have partnerships, emerging partnerships. These are local action groups. Currently, there are around 30 active ones in Serbia, and by definition, a local action group is a minimum of two functional parts of minimum two municipalities, and the number of local action groups will increase in Serbia, considering that from the EPAD program, the component is opening that will support their operations also. There are intermunicipal partnerships, but not enough, and their potential has not been fully tapped. And there is an example of an excellent partnership, of which in theory or in practice is not understood as such. These are regional development agencies. There are 17 of them even, and they are operational and functional for 20 years. And they were founded by 126 local self-governments in Serbia of these 17 regional development agencies. So there isn't a more comprehensive partnership at the national level. This is an example that is functioning. It's functioning well, more or less successfully. It depends on the point of view, but it's the fact is that they exist, they are operational. It's a complex partnership, both intermunicipal, public-private, involving all three sectors. And now let us go over to cross-border cooperation. First, in the preparation of this presentation, I was asking around with my colleagues and friends what's going on. And first, I was surprised that everybody looks at cross-border cooperation is when EU gives you some money for a project. For me, that's really not not how I see partnerships, because partnerships I see as a need, and if you need the funds, you will get them one way or the other. So I didn't expect this reaction. So if we define it like this in theory, and view it more specifically, you have a European cross-border cooperation program, and there's some financial support for a number of projects. And in Serbia, this has been going on since 2004 through cards and so on. It doesn't really matter. And so many projects were funded, and these, all these things. I don't want to bother you with it. But the way I see it, these are not partnerships. The cross-border partnerships, more broadly looking, is a form of international cooperation, of bilateral or multilateral, between some countries, parts of countries, that lead to the fulfillment of certain objectives. And there is considerably more or less of them than we actually need, or that the opportunities are. There's a long tradition of these partnerships. I want to recall the example that the largest hydropower plant in Serbia is an example of cross-border cooperation. And it was and it still is. We didn't build Đerdap or the Romanians themselves. We built them together. In former Yugoslavia, we have the nuclear power plant Krško. It's not a Slovenian project. It's a cross-border project. There it is managed, governed 50-50% between Slovenians and Croatians. So there is a long-standing tradition from the former Yugoslavia And another thing, the way things are going now, we have a number of sectors in which, like it or not, you cannot stay within national borders. Like the environment, it is impossible. Danube, water, air, there's no chance. Danube, Gerda, Banat, Shara Mountain, Via Militaris, transport, IT. How can we have borders in IT? How does it work? How do we regulate it, calculate it? We need to change this whole mindset. And to mention some examples, we have in Belgrade a seat of the Danube Competence Center with 60 members from 10 Danube countries. It's a good thing with a seat in Belgrade. Initially, somebody supported NALED like USAID, and this was initially supported by GIZ, but they moved on their own. We also have some examples. I like these good practice examples, some better, some less good. We have some cross-border partnerships that there's a lot of examples, but we don't have so much time. One of the last one is the Serbian Bulgarian Chamber of Commerce. It was established in 2013, and I haven't been able to understand when it was closed and whether it's formally closed, but it's been closed for a few years. Then we have some Euro regions that was fashionable in 2002-3. Then we have the community of regions. Then I think that 3/4 of these regions are not functional. They started with really some impressive names like Euro, Balkan, Niš, Skopje, Danube 21, Niš, Skopje, Sofia, then Stara Old Mountain, Morava, Pčinja, Struma, Drina, Sava, Majevica, and so on and so forth. And there's a lot of examples from the civil society where partnerships are entered into the easiest and they are the fastest, also. We have a few examples of informal partnerships. One of them is the town of Kikinda, RDA Banat, public company Roads of Serbia, and Zsombor from Romania. They implemented several projects so far, and 2.3 million euros for Serbia-Romania cooperation, and now they've implemented 5 million euros for the next project of the cycling tourism. And we have the Spirit of Balkans, which was formalized as an organization with founders from by 3 organizations from Serbia and Bulgaria, and only a few recommendations. Nothing can be expected in the short term. We need to have a long-term perspective. We have to be needs-based and not unavailable resources. A recommendation for those that are planning, they need to introduce cross-border inter-municipal ideas for cooperation in their strategic documents. We should learn about better and not so good examples and establish mechanisms that will gather together representatives of the different sectors. And that's it from me.
Thank you, Mr. Jeremic. We are also looking at our chat to see if questions are coming in from the panel. No questions as yet. We can continue. We have our colleague Dragan Jevtovic from Kragujevac, who was the local manager of the development of the strategy of integral urban development of the central Kragujevac area. We discussed partnerships and the importance of cooperation. Now let's see the participatory process, what it looks like, what is necessary for it on an example from Kragujevac. Mr. Jevtovic, I can see you. I can't hear you yet. I'd like to share my observations related to participation and the strategy of integral development. Let me just go to my presentation. The topic is the strategy of sustainable urban development, participative process of development, benefits and transformation. Let's start with our idea about the inclusion of stakeholders and participation of citizens and developing strategic documents. We usually divide them in three groups: politics and administration, then private and commercial actors, and then citizens and civic society. Then an important decision that was important until 2000, then after the adoption of the local self-government law and I can't remember the other law, but the relationship between the three actors completely changed. From the position of interest of private and commercial actors are pulling to one side and citizens to another. The local self-government law made local self-government earn money on everything they had available, and thus they had to cooperate with the private sector. What was an obligation before the 2000s was to protect public interest and the interest of citizens. This was somehow lost on the way, and the public interest, civic society and the citizens were not somehow visible. This was recognized in the latest law on planning and development, which introduced early public insight and participation of citizens in the development of strategic planning documents. What is important here to say that if there is no participation, the most important part, civic society and citizens, remain without their representatives in the procedure of decision-making and adopting the decisions. That is why participation is really important, and it was recognized not only in the EU, not only by people involved in the process of developing strategic documents, but it is a real need for us to meet the needs of the local community. If there is no participation, the partial interests will decide about priorities, what is going to be done and how. Whether it's in the citizens' interest, we can discuss this. And there is no adjustment factor there, which will ensure better life for the citizens and ensure the preservation of resources. This chart is part of the guideline to participation. It gives an overview of all possible options of civic participation and stakeholders in developing a planning document. In Kragujevac, for the first time, we had an opportunity to use to the full the participation procedure, and we organized discussion groups, surveys of citizens, roundtables with experts, politicians, investors, business people, NGOs, round tables with everyone who in any way had an interest or can affect or contribute to this. And when I say this, I primarily mean the reviewing and seeing the needs of the local community in the coming periods. I have to stress that in all these meetings, the key objective of the mediators, of those involved in the organization, is to listen to every participant and to hear every problem, every need, every idea that comes up in these meetings. This is what the atmosphere was like in these meetings. But what is important, in the early stage of participation and collecting various ideas, we developed the idea of a footpath in Šumarice Park. It was recognized as one of the better quality projects, and what was the result or the idea within the participatory approach was developed even before the strategy was adopted. It is one of the examples of how the civic participation can be developed in the participatory process and contribute to development of the local self-government. What is really important, this is the situation analysis at the beginning of the process of developing the strategy, a participatory approach, but whatever you call it. The key is to make the situation analysis. Why is it important? Firstly, the participatory approach is implemented by mediators and people who go with them to all these events. You have to be aware that citizens, stakeholders, everyone who is invited to the meeting, they are reviewing the competencies of people they will be discussing. In the meeting with citizens, it is important for the representatives of the local administration and representatives of urban planning who know about this issue and who can gain the citizens' trust, because people will believe that what they say will be taken into consideration. Also, citizens in these meetings expect certain answers, explanations, and what's more important, they expect there is a need in these meetings from a bunch of ideas that come up to get them all into this mainstream, to explain to people what the realistic possibilities are, the realistic potentials of the city itself, the budget, and so on. The citizens really understand this, but it is necessary to provide good explanation by the people who are competent to give it. The situation analysis and the preparation of people who will lead this participatory approach, this is key at the beginning of developing a strategy. This will decide on the quality of participation and how if they will participate in large numbers. In the procedure of developing a strategy, it is necessary to develop thematic areas. In Kragujevac, we had urban structures and the look of the city, traffic and environment, economy and tourism, education, healthcare, social protection, culture, for leisure and recreation. They do not need to overlap with the sectoral strategies, because we need to look into what the strategy will include, what is important for the city and its further development. In line with that, we decide on the thematic areas, and in every area we develop SWOT analysis where with the strategic document, with everything that is collected in working groups and through citizen participation, everything is taken into account and is a result of the SWOT analysis. What I have to say is that in the procedure of working with the citizens, the key goal is to record everything, the positive and the negative, in order to get as realistic a picture as possible and ensure a good SWOT analysis based on which the citizens' needs will be identified and the needs for the community to make an improvement from the strategy and the projects that will be proposed through the strategy. Based on such analysis, the central city area, based on the assessment in all thematic areas, the central area was divided into 4 areas: Stari Grad, Miloševenac, Vojno-Tehnički Zavod, i Veliki Park. Every area has its particularities, which are key in deciding on project activities and any further analysis and consideration within the strategy of urban development. We adopted the catalog of measures and projects, which was developed through SWOT analysis and the activities on the project, and then individually for each of these areas of intervention, we established the priorities, priority projects which are in line with the needs of people who live in these areas. This is the key point of the strategy. In this place, we sum up everything that was done before and reconcile it with the sources of funding. Well, there you decide on the project and establish where long-term projects can get included. That was usually avoided in the previous development of projects because politicians usually look into the fact that the project needs to be completed within one mandate. That is the development of the strategy. The long-term document provides an opportunity of establishing priorities and extrapolating them on a long-term level. Strategy for change. This is the inclusion of these long-term projects and their promotion and better review of problems and their potentials. In our previous work and developing documents, the administration came up with proposals which people commented or didn't comment, and then they were adopted. That is why our strategies were more like wish lists than established needs. And the projects that were proposed adjusted to the needs of the local community. And that is the point of this whole story, that projects which are established within the strategy, which are given priority, that they should share the problems of the citizens living in that territory. In Kragujevac, this strategy, before the development of the strategy, professional and public and everyone involved focused on the area, a central area of the city. The after development of the strategy, the focus of consideration was redirected to the Vojno-Tehnički Zavod as an area which was an ideal addition to the central area, which can allow for introduction of additional content important for the activities in the city center. Also important, especially when it comes to project priorities and needs of the citizens in the development of the strategy. It is important to include the media, hold press conferences, to distribute brochures in order to make that known and presented to the public and the citizens and politicians and also future donors. People interested and who need to get interested about the strategy and development of the strategy. That would be all about the experiences on the development of the strategy of development of the city of Kragujevac. I could talk more about this, but I have a limited time, so if there are questions for me, I'm there.
Thank you very much. You've indicated some important aspects of participation in terms of how we shift our focus and priorities, development priorities of the town itself. The next presentation, we will hear something more about how we are linking planning with the realistic funding sources. This is something that's a big step forward or a shift in related to traditional planning. Tell me if we have some questions in the chat. I would like to ask my colleague, Marica Mijailovic, to present the results from Kraljevo. I believe it will be interesting for you to hear what Kraljevo did. Marica, you have the floor. Hello, everyone. I would like first to thank the organizers and express my personal satisfaction. The impression that we had at the beginning of the development of this strategy is still something that we still share. I will keep it short so that I can answer questions. What I have to say is that at the moment when we started developing the strategy, it was a key moment for us in the sense that we have the problem, like a colleague from Kragujevac said. I don't want to repeat myself. We had a big problem that everybody was planning within their own domain, scope of work and competencies, starting with the citizens, local communities, all stakeholders had their own directions. We didn't hear each other out. It took us a while to start to listen to one another and then start planning together. What's important is that everybody maps all project proposals in space and define them loud and clear, point by point, and within a financial framework that the costs require. What we analyzed at first was the space of the city center in Kraljevo. This yellow line is the so-called transversal line. The red circles are new points of planning, and this pink point is something that we developed. What I have to say is that the strategy was very useful for us, not only the next year, but every year after that. Fortunately, we kept our directorate for planning and construction. Now it's changed a little bit, and you know that at the end of every budget year we have a plan, which is implemented then the next year. What is really important with the development plan, which starts with the designs and plans, and then the land expropriation and acquiring. Something's very important. First, you have to have a stable source of revenue. Then you need to plan clearly to implement specific items. If you cannot implement them, then you need to define them as capital investments. We managed to do that. This was a strategy, was a new integrated document that involved everything, and now we have a base to lean on for resources for every subsequent programs. The town of Kraljevo doesn't have such a big budget. And here you can see one of these several projects. This is the square of Serbian warriors that was funded from the Ministry of Culture and EIB. The yellow line, this transversal line, is the street of October victims, Oktoberskih žrtava, to the coach station. This is the center of the town. It was difficult to do this within one budget year. We had to do it within two from the budget of Kraljevo. But the situation was that we could not financially. Here is the athletic stadium through the Ministry of Sports. We have a ramp for people with disabilities that was entered into the first strategy, and then the documents, project and technical documents developed, and then we go to the permits, and then we have the foundation to apply for the funds to build it. These gyms in the open air and other smaller projects were also part of this implementation. Gas pipeline is something that is developed by the local self-government. The town invested more now in it, and the national budget as well. Here we have a situation where private legal entities are involved, then housing from the social fund, both local and national, where Kraljevo is developing infrastructure. I will tell you about a roadmap when we don't have enough money in the budget, and we can get and we cannot get other public funds. Then there are private donations. For example, this was with the bridge across the Ibar River. And for the development of design and technical documents, when we have a strategy and we know what we want to implement, we need to go step by step then and prepare then the project and technical documents, then resolve the property issues, then go to the local budget if we don't have it, then enter into partnership with the national level. We had the problem in the basin of Morava River when all local governments united, and we got private donations or used the various EU funds. As they say, money is everywhere. We just know where to spend it. Sometimes it's not a good thing when we spend more, but sometimes it's not good if we don't spend everything that we asked for. So now I saw in the budget revision in Kraljevo, local self-government, sometimes it's overly ambitious. We need to really realistically plan implementation frameworks and what is defined in the strategy and the urban spatial plans and all these detailed regulation plan, general regulation plan, and make these investments sustainable, also registered properly in the cadastre with the maintenance and the procedure itself. Because when this procedure is followed through, then it's a standardized procedure that can be replicated in other situations. Every situation is specific, and local governments need to know that they need to have capacities at the local level to do what the national level is asking us to do. They provide the funds, and it is on us to implement this. We need to have a ready list of developed projects. When it comes to implementation, we need to know clearly where we will tap and which pipeline we will use. And we need to implement it in realistic stages. We cannot stop an investment halfway because we ran out of money. And also what's really important is to realistically in the field to implement projects using different funding sources. I'm sorry, I finished in time, maybe even a little bit sooner, but we will save time for presentation. Can I ask a question? How did you get to the priority projects that you presented here as implemented ones? I have to admit that all stakeholders that I mentioned and our colleague from Karagwe mentioned, we all had our lists, our stickers, and we started sticking them one over the other on the map. And we came to 160, and then we had to make a triage. What's necessary is what citizens say, then what the experts say for the development of this town, then what the policy level says, and it needs to be adopted at the local assembly. And then when it's all done, then we get the list of priorities. We had one passage which was at the moment impossible to build, but we had to get all involved because this was the initial point of the realization of this transversal road through the central zone. And then we want to develop a pedestrian bridge, and that would be ideal. What are the ranges of investments? That's a few thousand euros to a few several million euros. Yes, I said earlier, there are projects that are not financially demanding, but they are spatially important, and they are the initial point, the spark for the development. But there is a situation where we have this one that costs €1 million. We were lucky that we got a donation from Mr. Glavčić, but the town had to make access roads from both sides. The bridge is not the only thing. So we need to observe things systematically and link it together. And when we address certain priorities, we have to see what other investments, activities, and events are required for this to fit in within the existing environment. I will comment a little bit further on these investments. Some time has passed, 7, 8, 9 years from the period when the 1-year development processes talking to our German colleagues who who were consultants then from the GIZ, I asked them if there was any difference between these strategies that were developed in Užice, Kragovec, and Kraljevic and what's the practice in Germany. And I don't know if you remember the colleague that worked then with us. No, there's no difference. The documents are similar, but what is different is additional topics of cultural education, health and social protection, sports and leisure, which are specific elements of social infrastructure that was included in these strategies. And we spoke about these reasons. It's the representatives of these sectors and traditional development of our public companies in this sector who participated in these processes. And all these strategies have this and as an additional feature, additional quality. I maybe didn't mention this specifically. Our riverbank is wonderful, but we don't use it to its full capacity. Our colleagues from Germany said, can't you see that you have like 3 parks in a small area, but the pedestrian zone there is a difference of 15 meters in the level of terrain, and for some people it's easy to do, but for some people with disabilities, mother with small children, it's not easy to do. So we had to level this. Now we got funds from the local self-government to develop some sports fields and terrains to develop the beach. And now these facilities exist, and Kraljevo is slowly descending to the riverbank. And we were sitting around the table then, and the then director reconstruct the street, and then the heating comes through and digs the same street, and then the water supply system comes and 6 months later and does the same. So we now synchronized all these plans, so when the street is open, you get all the pipelines through at one moment, and then it's closed, and then it lasts for a long time. The other way, it's a lot of costs, it takes longer, and the public is criticizing us with right. And this was a problem before. We didn't used to do it. When we started, it started with the integrated program, and now it's more sustainable, this strategy. Considering that I was a deputy mayor after being the director then, and it was more easily to implement some things and point out how important they were. We still have an issue, which was mentioned here, that projects that were there on the list, they weren't on the list there and stopped being interesting. They were just not easy to implement. We're talking about passages through housing blocks that are owned by several private individuals. And then it takes a lot of steps to do and come to the funding of the project itself. And afterwards, we need to talk about the maintenance, management of the area, and the users, of course. So this path is a very long one, and allotment procedures are also complicated. So this procedure is a slow one, but it's a safe one. We don't go any steps back. When we start on one road, even though it's a slow one, we finalize it in that direction. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We left Mr. Vukic, Director of the Regional Development Agency for Zlatibor. You listened to us carefully, and you jotted down your notes. I do that as well. You have a difficult task. There's a You had a topic institutional mechanisms because you have long experience and you don't think the regional framework to be an obstacle, yet you're finding ways of doing things. Please take the floor.
Dobar dan svima.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending, and thanks to everyone who is participating online. First of all, I'd like to thank EU-Pro for all the programs we had so far in the past, I don't know how many years, which simply contributed to get to this topic and a new stage in the EU Pro Plus in the coming 3 years. Listening to today's speakers, participating in all the previous EU Pro projects and other donor programs, I'd like to stress the coordination. Coordination is perhaps the most frequently used word today. It is key. Coordination and cooperation. My topic, this focus I have, is interpolated in all the stages we had so far. And the next stages, it is very important to mention manifold coordination with the Ministry of European Integration. This ministry encompasses everything that is involved in the Serbia's European integration. If we're talking about integral sustainable development, it has this integrating element, integrating plan and program of operation of all the other ministries, looking by sectors, by ministries, and we are talking about integral sustainable development, Ministry of EU integrations and EU Pro have this integrated sustainable development and preparation of Serbia to join the EU. And that is the essence that is really important in the previous and the future cooperation on this program. Coordination between the ministry, EU Pro, and Vladan mentioned, well, regional development agencies who for the past 19 years are implementing inter-municipal cooperation from micro projects of 2 neighboring or 3 neighboring municipalities, the entire region, up to large-scale projects, donor programs. They have proven that they are a good mechanism, a good tool. Of course, like any tool, it can remain in your drawer, and sometimes you use it every day. It is very important for this tool, not only regional development agencies. Vladan and myself represent the regional development agencies and the Serbian association of these agencies, which was created to increase the efficiency of this mechanism which formally exists. Municipalities are our funders. Direct cooperation with the Ministry of European Integration, accredited by the Ministry of the Economy. We offer programs to the Ministry of Agriculture. We have feasibility reports for the Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of the Environment, infrastructure. It is very important for these tools that we have. Now we are going back to the Japanese model to improve what we have. If we keep saying we don't have this, we have to say we do have the tools and strong support from the government and the ministry, donor programs, EU Pro, which has proven in a host of sectors that were available. The Regional Development Agency in Zlatibor and other territories where EU Pro was present simply provided support to everyone who competed for the EU Pro programs, from small associations, small municipalities which do not have the capacities, because municipalities remained without staff, the offices for local economic development were weak, and they were preoccupied with current affairs, local affairs, how to get to the regional level. We have donor support, regional development agencies, and the ministry. This was proven to be a successful model. I'll give from planning to development a project financed by the Ministry of Tourism for Golia Mountain. It has proven to be a model. It can be transposed to Tara Mountain, which is shared by several municipalities, Pešter, Divčibare, and other mountains. We have a huge potential to develop tourism investments, and it moves all the other sectors. So we have shown that in this project, from planning to development, the participation of all stakeholders, which was also very frequently mentioned today, that we can create mechanisms, and that this coordination of donor funds, the ministry, the line ministry, public companies, local public utility companies, because it does happen because of poor intermunicipal cooperation. There is no maintenance of roads in mountains, which are shared by several municipalities. Who is paying what? Who is to take away the waste and so on? It sounds simple, but it sometimes proves to be difficult, and it's an enormous problem for the tourists, which are threatened during their holidays because of these situations.
Samo da vratimo ovako.
Let me just go back.
I sad bih ja prešao na neke konkretne primjere.
I just give some specific examples from Zlatibor. Vladan mentioned tourism, regional tourist organization of West Serbia. We don't need to wait for the laws to compel us to intermunicipal cooperation or EU directives. We have a realistic problem of waste management, and the problem is making us cooperate, not the law, not someone from the EU or someone else. It is very important to identify the problem, to involve all the actors. Thank you for a series of similar workshops and opportunities and organizations, so that the private, the public, the civil sector can exchange their opinions and come to conclusions, to adopt documents, which of course need to be implemented, but this familiarity with adoption of documents ensures efficiency in implementation. Any document that was given to someone or imposed on someone does not have the energy to push the implementers to implement what was done through previous programs. I expect this also in the future. I expect this energy to mobilize everyone. I will give an example of tourism and Priboj, which will soon become the only city which will not use fossil fuel. Who would expect from Priboj, which was a very underdeveloped municipality with very weak capacities in public, private, and civil sectors to reach this revolutionary concept, coordination and cooperation, participation of everyone. And as we mentioned, the citizens and the private sector, which frequently have comments that someone is not helping them. They did not wait for a directive to cooperate. Simply environment protection, on the other hand, high profit for the local population of the use of wood, biomass, waste wood for local needs. This will affect the reduction of the foreign trade deficit for payment of imported fuels, and the local producers will make profit. This is intermunicipal cooperation of energy providers for the municipality of Priboj. This process lasted, took three stages. They developed the market for biomass. Keys financed this, but it was not only one donor. It is very important this regional development agency use this mechanism that needs to be used and activated through other program mechanisms and ministerial programs. It led to the fact that one municipality, which was understaffed and had insufficient capacities to implement it, to be able to do it. We will have a strong local economy which will provide energy to the private and public sector, and on the other hand, we will have clean air in Priboj and the development of spa tourism of the spa of Priboj. So multiple effect. An example of integrated sustainable development in action, not in Switzerland, not in highly developed Germany or somewhere else, but in a municipality that is considered to be underdeveloped, but it has implemented something that is a very good example to be upscaled. And as the agency, we are already transferring this to the neighboring municipalities where they are building boiler rooms on biomass. They are transferring all to biomass. There is nothing more efficient than success. Nothing helps you more in your future success than your previous success. If one municipality could make it, it sometimes happens that one municipality can do something the other can't, although they operate under the same laws. And you ask yourself, why? Institutional mechanisms are important. They should, the exchange of experiences as this one should serve as when two municipal administrations sit down and discuss and say, okay, how did you do it? Why wouldn't do it? And the donors just help systemic change. They can't develop a systemic change. Even a successful project, if it doesn't ensure the integration into the whole mechanism of public, private, and civil sector, it will not be possible. We just have a successful project which will have its effects for a year or two, and that's it. Also important is the preparation for the EU standards that are coming up in all areas. And we often are not aware of this, even the successful companies. Through the EU Pro cluster, as metal group, where we had internationalization of operations due to coronavirus, we had to cancel the Hanover fair. So what now? How to digitalize international promotion of our private sector without physically attending a fair. So I'd like to thank the EU Pro because they took into consideration the current situation. They transformed the physical attendance of the fair into virtual presentations of these companies so that now they can participate in Hong Kong, in Berlin, New York, in the presentation of internationalization of their products. This digitalization simply it is difficult. Local self-government don't have enough funds, not even for current expenses, but there are donor funds, ministry funds, national funds, international funds, which can be used. But it's really important to offer this institutional mechanism for efficient implementation and use of funds. I tried to shorten my presentation because a lot was said in the previous presentation. Just a brief comment, as Vladan mentioned, about the regional waste management as an example of intermunicipal cooperation. We as the agency have excellent cooperation with the Ministry of Environment Protection. We are currently expanding this regional landslide and landfill, and we are equipping the landfill Duboko. It will accept the suspension which the other municipalities had in the Banjica landfill. It was unable to be activated. It will now be part of the Duboko landfill through donor funds, ministry funds, building transfer stations, and coordination of everyone. We reached the point where we can accept 4 municipalities, which will bring not only communal waste, but also construction waste, large waste. There will be capacities for turning the waste into raw materials. These are all examples of people operating under the same laws, and some say this cannot be done. We understand this. The point of donor programs and today's meetings and the future meeting is how to remove this, how to repair this missing chain. We don't need large funds. We need to develop an efficient governance mechanism for a certain topic. Thank you. We are here for all your questions. Thank you. You mentioned the standards. One of the standards in the process of EU integrations, which refers to cohesion policy and the EU Codex on Partnership, which implies various forms of participation, but also various forms of partnership. It is not only public-private partnership as we are considering it, it is much more. Mr. Jeremic, how do you see this? Are we ready? Are we capable to establish new standards in partnership?
It's difficult to say. Briefly, I can say that we are willing, but it takes some effort, so we'll see how it plays out. For example, we had an example of schools. Were the schools ready to implement online curriculum. And did they implement it? They did. If we wait to be ready for something, to wait until the last day before the show starts and to buy the tickets, we cannot wait for all the conditions to be fully met for something to start. The way I see it, the schools were very fast to shift to digital area because of the corona, of course, but it showed us that it takes a short time to adapt to changes. So schools have proven to be ready to manage change even before the private sector was able to introduce digital transformations. How did this happen? We didn't prepare schools for 3 years for digital transformation. Simply, you can offer a model and say, let's start doing it, and then we start doing it. The market changes so quickly. It's already changed in across all sectors, agriculture, industry. The competition is very strong, international, European. There's no time to wait for like 20 preconditions to be met so we can introduce change. The change is here. We can start tomorrow. We just need to find successful models locally, internationally, and start applying them. If you will allow me, I want to draw a parallel with funding in general. I've been working on local development in Serbia over a decade now, and we started gradually from 6 municipalities. We spread to 8, 25, 34, 99, and so on. Several times I was criticized as someone like, what do you base these local development programs on when there are no regional strategies? How is the selection of municipalities to be covered by our programs done? So we presented our criteria. We said we are working with underdeveloped, devastated municipalities. Then we said, if we want to talk about development, we can't only support undeveloped, we need to support regional development centers as well. So there was always some doubts from our colleagues. I've always felt I needed to defend something that I was working on, and I kept saying, even though there aren't strategies, there are priorities, there are needs, but how do we select among these priorities? And now we came to the idea that EU Pro Plus should support this integrated development. But we also need to explain this integrated development is not necessarily regional development. And something that this territorial or administrational line produced, but it's very important to see added value, to bring together sources of funding, find a mechanism to apply. And we feel this is not easy, even though our colleagues from UNOPS are giving us feedback that Serbia has done a lot on this. I would like us to discuss shortly how we could, we don't have a nice STD defined mechanism that we will implement within EU Pro Plus. And now we all need to fund some projects in the area of economic infrastructure, social infrastructure. We still won't give up on supporting businesses, the business sector, small businesses. So we need to hear some encouraging facts. Thank you on your presentation. Regional development agencies participating in supporting municipalities to develop development plans. The loan planning system is making, so to say, municipalities by providing deadlines that have already expired, by the way, that they need to adopt development plans, and the municipalities are preparing intensively with support of donors, standing conference of town and municipalities. They are a very strong ally and partner with all mechanisms with the development of development plans, also including priorities, also including baselines. The process has been initiated to develop a list of priorities. There is a series of national sector strategies that can be the source, that are binding, and can be the source and justification for some of the projects. We have the strategy for integral sustainable development, that is, urban development, that includes a great analysis of local economic development that can serve as a foundation to define priorities, where we have action plans for digital transformation, government action plans that were adopted, are valid for the next period of 3 or 5 years. This is an official document adopted by the ministry government for some sectors that are to be planned. So I feel this is maybe not everything has been covered, but there are quite a few strategic documents that are in power or effective, that there are local documents that have been adopted or will be adopted within the next 6 or 9 months. When it comes to smaller municipalities, there's a agricultural strategy for the development of agricultural and rural development is also effective. We can use all national strategies that contain enough elements. If you can just turn off your microphone. Thank you very much. I asked Mr. Viktor Veljovic to tell us whether you were from EU Pro, but then I realized that you were from the EU delegation. Just to clarify to our colleagues here, our experience from the past period, Slavko Lukic and Maris Mijailovic, as representatives of local institutions, participated in the strategy for sustainable urban development of the Republic of Serbia. One of the initial goals was to define 6 national programs of urban development. And an integral part of this document, in addition to the strategic directions and packages of measures, were these recommended interventions as 6 national programs, but also to allocate funds at the national level as financial support to this. The ministry did not have support from the Ministry of Finance then, and this is where the operational and programmatic part fell through. But they have priority areas of intervention, and it's a good one. These are zones and settlements that have social issues affected by climate change. The urban structure of the settlements is such that there are technical issues relating to technical infrastructures, which is one of the key issues of all urban settlements in Serbia. Brownfield, site development, there's a capital set aside, but it can't be initiated. It's a serious potential. It's not just a problem, but it's a local development potential. Then the topic of cultural heritage. which entails protecting monuments, but also everything that falls under cultural activities and supporting tourism development. No, we are talking about the strategy of the development of urban areas where identified priorities were supported by local institutions because they were participating in the process. They provided inputs, and then the national program was developed. Then we have the rural development strategy, which also identifies priorities. And as long as we don't have clearly participatory processes that give legitimacy to certain plans on the local level, we need to find ways to use existing documents. What Mr. Slavko Lukic was saying about the action plan and digitalization, it's clear what the priorities are to focus on. I thought we could use this as a finale of our panel today. I wrote down what our colleagues mentioned and what topics they mentioned regarding partnership and integral rural urban development, and I believe this will be a takeaway for us. Mr. Jeremic spoke about partnerships related to municipal waste, zoo hygiene, landfills, tourism development, local action groups for supporting rural development. Mr. Dragan Jevtovic spoke about the strategy of integral rural development of urban development of Kragujevac on cultural heritage, brownfield sites, connecting research, academia, and the business sector. This was one of the priorities. Marica Milovic presented projects on public spaces, sports, leisure, urban mobility, gas pipelines, developing services. Please say if I left something out. Slavko Lukic spoke about renewable energy sources in biomass, which is absolutely a step forward in Serbia today, which is the highest potential when we're talking about renewable energy sources, energy efficiency, green agenda, everything that people are dealing with within the green deal for Western Balkans. Did I leave something out, Mr. Jeremic? Okay, does somebody have something to add? Are we clear on what we were talking about? It seems to me that as if we had a mini strategy at this panel, and this is now the conclusion and Victor's conclusion. Where is the money that we need to tap into now that we mentioned so we will give all of you our strategies. You will have a partner at the local level in Kraljevo, and then we will give our best to cooperate with the regions around. But at least we can start with a pilot project and move on with all of this that we spoke about today and show that is possible to implement in the field. Mr. Viktor Veljevic, I wanted to add something. Our idea was to present some examples that we could see here, but also mechanisms to address some complex issues. This new program that is coming, basing on our previous experience and some research that we conducted in discussions with local self-governments, it tells us that we don't have means to address certain issues. And this is something that's a challenge for us. Radka said there's over 500 brownfield sites there. Most of them are locked in because of some, property issues, lack of opportunities of communication with the central local level and so on. And Maritz also mentioned solutions which are the passages that free and old parts of the town and enable spaces to be reactivated. This is not a municipal level issue, national level issue, but this is a small site that requires institutional approach. It's not just a technical solution, but we need to see how it's governed, whether this will be a market, a square, a flower shop. This is a micro world. And this is why it's very important to consider introducing such mechanisms, not only because this is a need that comes together with requirements for EU accession, but because we need to address some complex issues that we don't have a solution for years now, to regulate some settlements that are illegal, informal, to activate some economic potential, some neglected cultural heritage sites. We've been trying to find solutions for years, but there isn't an adequate one because we don't have a mechanism. But by defining long-term strategies, which define serious priorities, Mr. Jeftovic mentioned that projects are defined up to one mandate, and these processes go on for 20 years. And Marica mentioned how difficult it is to get to a solution for a small passage. And they had a mechanism for jointly addressing issues. And what if you don't? Yes, you mentioned landfill Dubuco. This was funded by the EU in 2004 or 5 through the MISP, but also through the first program, we started working on Banjica. We invested so much money for various feasibility studies. We couldn't get to a solution, and so much money was invested. There was environmental issues. I don't want to list all the issues now here. I have this historical memory, as they call it, because I was the one who was behind this project, and I can't believe that after so many years, solutions have not been found, not to mention the amount of money invested. Just for example, this is a Duboco landfill. Thank you for this. Thank you for this. I apologize, but we will switch between ourselves now.
Good analysis of the problem yields good solutions. The landfill Duboco and Banjica, we as an agency participated in both projects, one successful, one unsuccessful. Banjica landfill showed that it was necessary, in addition to money, to have continuous training of the staff, because there was a drain of people, there are economic migrations and other sorts of migrations. So underdeveloped municipalities, they don't have strong public utility companies from where they can delegate stuff. I know the director of the Banjica landfill. They set up a company and we supported it, but the management was not developed like in Duboco. Two neighboring territories, one had strong management and a very strong systemic support of the EU, and in Banjica we have 4 municipalities which could not develop the management to govern what they were entrusted with. That's the difference. It's very important how to help some territories, local self-governments which have a public utility problem, to acquire management capacities to manage this system. That's what happened in Banjica. But in this transformation, we can find an optimal solution, I guess. The former landfill will be a transfer station. I don't think we will ever finish the discussion. We will have an opportunity to continue in the cocktail after this. We have to finish because there are other obligations. Thank you all. Yeah, Mr. Jeremic, did you want to add something? Thank you very much for this good quality panel. Thank you to all the interlocutors and the hosts.